Welcome to On the Bubble Podcast, episode 89. I'm your host, Sabasa J. Witten. With me is my co-host, Yuki Lee Bender. Today, we're going to be doing our last How to Draft episode for Rosetta, and it's going to be How to Draft Florian. And we're going to be talking about everything Florian. But before we do that, how was week 2 of your PQ, Yuki?
I played one PQ. You were also there. It was a draft PQ. I think we had 17 players, so we did 2 pods, and we had exactly enough people to do 2 drafts instead of 1 draft, which made the store stay open a whole extra 3 hours later than they thought they were going to have to, which was kind of funny. But that did mean we get to do 2 drafts and then a top 8 draft, which was a lot of fun. I think I drafted a pretty good Verdance deck that I 2-1'd with, just barely, and almost went 1-2 with, which I was a little surprised about. I drafted an Acilio deck in what was one of the hardest drafts I've ever done in this set. Just finding my lane and navigating that draft was really, really tough. And at the end of the pack, I had a bunch of blue and yellow lightning cards and 1 red flittering charge. And I was just I hope that I get there because everything else is cut. And I don't know, maybe we get the lightning deck. And I got a decent deck. I got 2-1 with that as well. Made top 8, lost in top 8 with a okay Aurora deck. I kind of expect that deck to 2-1, but I did end up losing to Aaron, who made the finals. And yeah, that was my PQ. If you're interested in those draft decks or more about how that went, all of that is available on Patreon and our Discord, as well as a whole bunch of other content. So if you're interested in either our Patreon, Discord, or any other content that we have for CC or draft on our Patreon, check us out at patreon.com/onthebobble. And I just want to take a moment also to thank all of our patrons. We've gained a huge number of patrons just recently this season, and it's honestly really exciting. And we're just, I don't know, I'm super, super thankful for everyone's support. It's really incredible, and it really helps us to kind of keep doing what we're doing.
Yeah, and it's great that you're making a bunch of CC content now on there too, right? I think we have a Dash.io list on there and a Aurora list on there, and all those lists are pretty cool to check out as well.
Yeah, I've sort of been doing how to play guides with a deck list and a little bit of a basic sideboard. I've been bouncing around between decks a whole bunch. So I was on Florian at the start, then Aurora, and then Dash.io, and been just kind of trying a bunch of stuff out, trying to figure out the world's metagames. So I've been sort of just posting about whatever I've been working on for the week, and I've been doing typically about 1 post per week on average, sometimes a little bit more. But yeah, everybody's support kind of helps make that possible. So thank you to everyone for that support. You were also at the same PQ. You did pretty well. Do you want to tell people about your ProQuest?
Yeah, that's great. So I guess to boil it down, I did end up taking the ProQuest down. I think the third draft kind of felt a little bit scammy, but it was great. I guess I'll start from the beginning. I ended up drafting Verdance. I ended up getting the round 1 bye in the 17-player event, and then went win-lose for the 2-1. And then I drafted Florian in the second draft. I think the same pot as Yuki. And I went 3-0 with the Florian deck. I had 3 tight games, and I think I squeaked out all 3 games. Felt great. So went to the last draft, the top 8 draft, with the 5-1 record, the only 5-1 in the tournament. And so first seed. And pack 1, pick 1. I open my pack and I see Germinate. So I pick it, and it's gonna be very hard to push me off Florian at this point. And then in pack 1 and pack 2, I actually end up with 0 decompose cards and no equipment as well. I was in pack review after pack 2, and I'm just oh no, this deck's gonna fall apart. I was kind of sure that I was gonna go lose the first round with this deck, because no earth equipments, actually no equipments in general, and no decompose, so I can't turn on Germinate. And then I open my pack 3 and I see 2 decompose cards and the earth helmet, and I'm just oh my god, I need this decompose card. I'm gonna pick this red Summer's Fall or something. And then I get immediately past a random yellow decompose card, and I'm 2 decompose cards. Here I go. I am just gonna pitch stack, or at least just force myself to play these 2 decompose cards, turn on Germinate, pitch 12 into Germinate, and win every game. and that's basically what ended up happening. Is like I had like 3 decomposed cards in total, and I just had to draw 2 of them, play it, Arsenal Germinate, pitch 12 into Germinate, make 14 Rune Chance, gain 7, and then kill my opponent with like an Arcane Cussing Deadwood Dirge combo. So that's basically how every game went. Um, except for the Aurora game where I ended up fatiguing him, but otherwise, yeah, it was every game was kind of a nail biter because my deck kind of sucked and no equipment Florian. So it was an interesting draft to say the least.
Yeah, that draft was a little bit funny. I kind of like started in Lightning and just like kept going Aurora, and it felt really open, but I don't know. There ended up being 3 Auroras at the table. I kind of wonder if somebody maybe pivoted because I had like a whole bunch of red and yellow fries and lightning surges, but like almost all of them I got in pack 1. And I just like kind of never really got very much more. Like I might have picked up like 1 or 2 other lightning cards in the other packs, and it was just like, this is weird. Like I don't know what happened.
I think what it was in pack 1 and 2, there was the quality of the Earth cards were kind of low, and I think there might have been slightly less Earth cards and replaced with generics in that pod, because like I was like aggressively taking the Earth cards, and then I still didn't see any decompose, and that was like commonly passing multiple packs with like no Earth cards, and I would be picking up like some yellow harvest season or something from that pack and like making sure all the Earth cards were out of the pack
Interesting. Okay.
because I was really, really needing the Germinate to work. Mostly like after pick like 5 of pack 1, I was like dedicated to cutting all the Earth cards.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Okay. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, maybe I pushed a couple of people into Lightning after that, so then they would be how we were positioned. If they turned into Lightning, then they'll be passing to you in pack 3.
Yeah, yeah. That would make sense. Yeah, because it definitely felt like it was really open, and then it just like kind of wasn't as open. And I don't think my Aurora deck was bad by any means, but it was just like I had such a good start that I thought I was gonna have a crazy Aurora deck, and then by the end of it, I was like, this is somehow just okay.
An average Aurora deck. Oh, I think my second round opponent, Donkey, he had Arc Lightning, and I don't know when he opened it, but I would assume he opened it in pack 1 or pack 2, and maybe he moved into Aurora after opening it.
Gotcha. That could make some sense. That card is very strong. I don't think it's quite Germinate, but it is not as far off as you would think.
Yeah, but I can tell you for a fact that Germinate is 1 point better than Arc Lightning because I was at 1 life after everything resolved.
I see. I see.
Germinate is a card that should not be legal and limited. Let's just say that.
Yeah, it feels pretty crushing and pretty unbeatable in most matchups if the Florian gets to the point where they can resolve it, which is a little bit unfortunate. I think that overall, like, there's a lot of very powerful cards in this deck, or sorry, in this set for limited. Not too many of them feel that egregious, but every once in a while, yeah, the Germinates are pretty bad. The Arc Lightnings are up there, and we also had like one draft with like a double rampant growth life verdant stack that was just disgusting. So yeah, there's some wacky stuff that can happen in this format. I hope that I don't have to play against some like crazy majestic pile at Worlds, but we will see what happens, I guess.
Yeah. The Majestics, there's not that many. I think there's like 3 or maybe 4 Majestics that are like at that level of like, oh, my opponent plays it. I don't know if I can ever win this game type of cards, but I think it's like a good number, you know? It's like it's it's there at a frequency where like it doesn't happen that often, but then it happens just often enough that like you kind of get to do this cool stuff from the set.
Yeah, and some of them are at a pretty nice spot. Like Felling of the Crown, I thought was gonna be like way too much in limited, and it's like pretty insane, especially against the Lightning heroes. But in some of the Earth mirrors, like I've definitely played Felling of the Crown and not won, or having a Felling of the Crown played against me and won. It's just like I think because it doesn't make you discard the card, it's just like, oh, I put this card to my second cycle, I block 6, I play my arsenal, that's a big attack, and like it's somehow just kind of fine. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I've also beat like Channel the Millennium Tree. Like that card's pretty
Mhm.
good, but like that card's also still beatable. The actual outrageous one is Germinate, and everything else seems kind of beatable. Even Channel Lightning Valley is like insane when somebody plays it, but like it's not unbeatable.
I agree with that. I agree with that for sure. Yeah, 10 foot tall and bulletproof can be like really crazy, but it can also be kind of game losing. So yeah, it's interesting.
Oh yeah, when you have to block with 10 foot fall for like an attack for 5 or 6. Oh, that's mostly in the middle of the game. You're just like, oh no, like this is the game. That game is over.
Yeah, it's like really good deck damage and a lot of tempo, which like sometimes in the right spot can swing the game. But yeah, I've also had opponents that play it, and I see them play it, and I'm just like, oh, you can't win anymore.
Yeah, intellect penalty 2 is pretty big. It's a pretty big downside. One last card I want to talk about is at least we don't have to play with the legendaries like Face Purgatory. Imagine having to play against Face Purgatory in draft.
Yeah, a lot of the legendaries would be pretty not okay. Lightning Greaves, they just have AB1.
Oh yeah, there's some AB armor in the. You're right. You're right.
The Earth Chess Piece and Florian, they just like make two. They have Florian online. They make two embodiments. Oh, it's a good thing the legendary equipment. It's a good thing the legendary equipment are out of the main set.
Yes, they're now part of the draftable cards. So glad. So glad. Okay, yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Let's move right into the Florian How to Draft episode. So I guess to start off with, we're going to talk about how many of each kind of cards there are. We've already covered all of these because they share with Verdance and Aurora, but we'll go over it again. So starting with the Earth cards, we have 25 commons. There's going to be 3 blocks on Autumn Touch, 19 2 blocks, and 3 null blocks. And for the Earth cards, there's 10 rares with 6 2 blocks, 1 null block, and 3 defense reactions that block for 4, 3, and 2, technically, if you decompose. I guess we just move right into Runeblade 2.
Yeah, so the Runeblade card pool, there are 28 commons, 21 of which are 3 blocks, 7 of which are 2 blocks. And then in the rare slot, we have 13 rares, 9 3 blocks, and 4 2 blocks. So we've been saying this a lot in the set, but most of your class cards block 3, and most of your element cards block 2. Nothing super new there. But I think that Florian feels kind of like maybe the sturdiest hero. I think Verdance technically has more of a block value in the wizard card pool, but Florian having the weapon just makes him sort of like he has kind of the best late game of any hero, I feel, and I don't think it's like particularly close.
He feels like he's the only hero with a weapon, right? Like,
Yeah.
Aurora's weapon is like, you need to play a lightning card for it to get, like, to come in for 2, and Florian's attack comes in for 2 no matter what you do. So like just like the floor on Florian's weapon is so much higher. And then all you have to do is play it, make an aura. It doesn't even have to be like an aura action card, or it can just be like a token, and that satisfies the Rotwood Reapers have an aura created this turn.
Yeah, and there's just so many auras, like the Blue Harvest Seasons, and then like Sigil of Earth triggers twice. Yeah, there's just so many like junky auras that you can play that are just basically like end up being at least 5 point cards in terms of like you swing Rot Road Reaper for 4, and then you like I don't know, you like gain a life, or you make a rune chant, or like you get like some like minor effect, you get +1 power, or like whatever it is. It just like ends up being like kind of like a 5 point play, which is pretty good for like blues that nobody wants.
Yes, yes. What it is though is like Florian, the best thing about Florian is that he actually has cards where he can get like 15th pick, or sorry, not 15th, 14th pick or 13th pick, and is like totally not even like bad. It's like it's not even filler, right? Like, 'cause if you get like Sigil of Earth like pretty late, like 10th or 11th pick, it's kind of insane, right? Like it's not like the card is bad. It's like actively good.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think the other nice thing about Florian is We talked about how strong the Earth card pool is in terms of like the yellows and the blues also being good. Florian has that even more because, like we talked about, Sigillar of Earth, the yellow and blue harvest seasons and strong yields are also just like totally playable in Florian because they work really well with his weapon. And in addition to all of that, because the Runeblade card pool has some go again in it with cards like Incantation, Rune Rager Swarm, Deadwood Dirge, and Arcane Cussing, like all these cards we talked about in Aurora, he can also just sometimes like play 4 card hands. Like it feels like Verdance has to like specifically have like the life gain or like work a little bit harder to convert her hands. But Florian, I think if it is built in the right way or has the right cards in it, can just like block really well and play this fatigue game. But then also like if you don't pressure him, he can just hit you for a bunch of damage. And that flexibility to just like kind of play a whole bunch of different game plans, I think means I think Florian might just be the strongest deck when he comes together, but I also think that a lot of people like drafting Florian because he's intuitive and very powerful and has a very deep card pool and supports a lot of drafters, so he is often very contested. But I think if you get like the crazy Florian deck, it might just be the best deck in the format. Do you think you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. I think like having like 6 or 7 replacement level cards in like a good Florian deck still makes a Florian deck pretty strong. That's just not true for any of the other heroes in this set. Like Aurora really needs like lightning reds, whereas like if Florian only has earth yellows, it's kind of like in the same kind of power level still, I think. Verdance really needs like the wizard reds, but you know, Florian doesn't need reds. Same with Ocilio. I feel like Florian's like the one hero in the set where if you are like lacking reds, you can still 3-0 a pod with. It's like it's the only hero that can 3-0 a pod without like having the 10 reds in your deck, or like you could have like a 6 red Florian deck and still be pretty functional.
Yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of that just comes from what Rotwood Reaper. Rotwood Reaper being a 2 for 4 that you technically have to work for a little bit, but it's pretty easy to enable is just really, really good and gives them such a high floor. And in this episode, I think we're going to be primarily talking about more earth-centric Florian decks, but I also do want to mention that you can play just kind of like a Runeblade pile Florian deck because all the rune chant stuff works with the weapon. We've talked a lot about how the Runeblade cards have a lot of synergy with themselves. So you can also dip like we'll be talking about the good Runeblade cards in Florian, but you can absolutely just lean very, very hard into the Runeblade card pool as well and play a Florian deck like that, and it will also work pretty good. It's not one that I have a ton of experience drafting, but I have run into it a couple times here and there, and it's honestly pretty strong too.
Yeah, yeah. Just some cards naturally making a rune chant to make your Rotwood Reaper attack for 4 is just so good. Just so good.
Yeah, and I've definitely like seen decks that just like have a bunch of dirges and cussings, and they're like, yeah, I don't decompose, but my deck can make like 15 rune chants, and it's like, yeah, that that is pretty good.
Yeah. And if their whole deck is Runeblade cards, they all block for 3. So like
Hmm.
it's hard to get through as well.
Yeah, yeah. So those decks are also pretty good, but I think we'll be primarily talking about Earth Runeblade just because I don't know. I think that usually you wind up with some amount of Earth when you are Florian.
Yeah, I think the payoff you get from getting 4 earth cards in your banish zone as Florian is like the biggest upside. It's like it's better than Verdance getting 4 earth cards, I think. Because like the moment you start making like 2 rune chants every time you would make a rune chant, it really feels unfair. Mostly if you do like the combo that we were talking about on the Aurora episode of like playing Arcane Cussing into Deadwood Dirge, it would make 6 rune chants. But then if you have Florian active, it makes 8 rune chants, and that difference is quite big, right?
Yeah, yeah. So maybe on that note, we can kind of jump into our key cards. So key cards for Florian are pretty much all of the rune chant makers, at least all of the good ones. So we talked about the Deadwood Dirge and Arcane Cussing combo. That is still really good and really premium here. It's probably even a little bit better in Florian than in Aurora, but the fact that you're still happy to play it in Aurora, even though it doesn't really feed into her weapon or hero text box, tells you how strong it is. And the fact that with Florian, like Deadwood Dirge, Arcane Cussing, costs 1, and then Rotwood Reaper costs 2, and that combo turns on Rotwood Reaper. Like, with nothing else, that is 6 arcane and 4 physical. And if Florian's online, it's 8 arcane and 4 physical off of 3 cards, which is just so, so strong. Just like for Aurora, Runehold release, really good. Probably even better in Florian, but really, really good. And when this makes 2 rune chance, it feels honestly pretty unfair. Florian's meld card, Arcane Seed's Life, is crazy. It is an Earth 3 block that is a 0 for 3 with Go Again. And then if you have Florian online, it's a 0 for 5 with Go Again. And it's like Arcane too. I think this is the best meld card. This one or Comet Storm Shock is the best meld card, I think.
Yeah, they're close. Comet Storm is a card that, like, when you're losing and they play that card, you feel like you can't win. And Arcane Seed's Life is a kind of card where it's like, maybe I can beat this card. And then you go, no, I can't beat this card.
Yeah. It's like good in your pitch deck, but you can also just first cycle it and it's still really good. You can have a deck that can't turn Florian on and it's still good. It's just like always good. This is like this card is like super pack one pick one-able. In fact, I think that you should pack one pick one this card over like most cards in the set. Like maybe there's like some M's that are better, but this is just like one of the best cards in the set.
Yeah, there's like, the M's that we talked about in the beginning of the episode, Rampant Life Growth, Germinate, and Arc Lightning. Like, those 3.
That might be the only things better than this card.
Yeah, I think a good way to think about Arcane Seed's Life is this is just like, it's a zap that has Go Again on it. Like, you don't have to work hard for the Go Again. It just zaps you. It has Go Again already. Like, why does this card have Go Again? Like, this card didn't need Go Again.
But it's like better than that too, right? Because it's also an Earth card and it's also a 0 for 5 once Florian's online. Like just like all aspects of this card are completely crazy. Arcane Seed's Life is like super, super pushed. Like this card feels unfair and constructed, so that should tell you a little bit about it in limited. Malefic Incantation is the other like super, super premium rune chant maker. We talked about it being really good in Aurora and Red. I think the yellow is also pretty solid. In Florian, it's even better, of course, because you can double up. And anytime that this starts making 2 rune chants every time you play an attack, or like the first time you play an attack for the turn, is it's kind of broken, honestly.
Yeah, once you have Florian online, you play a red incantation, and if you can trigger all 3 times, that's a 0 for 6 arcane.
Yeah.
That's Wizards can't even do that.
Yeah, it is really good, and it has Go Again. Like once again, it just has Go Again. The Runeblade cards have Go Again. It's so strong. The final one that is probably a little bit lower than all these other pieces, but is still very, very, very good, is Sigil of Deadwood. We talked about this being an important glue piece that has a lot of synergy in the Runeblade card pool. It still does all of those things. It makes 2 rune chants if your Florian's online, and importantly, it turns on Rotwood Reaper twice. So oftentimes you can just pitch, like the baseline of this card is you pitch it and then Florian's online, you play it, you swing Rotwood Reaper for 4, and then on your next turn it pops, makes 2 rune chants, and you can swing Rotwood Reaper for 4 and 2 arcane, which is crazy. Like it's just so much value out of a blue.
This is one of those cards as well that, like, the other Runeblade, like Aurora, doesn't really want this Sigil of Deadwood, so you end up getting this card quite late in Florian, and you're only really fighting other Florians for the Sigil of Deadwoods. So this ends up being like a key card that you kind of don't have to pick too early, and you just need to be careful if there's like too many Florians, then these cards will be like, you won't be able to see these cards if there's too many Florians in your pod. And other than that, you'll definitely get this card.
And it is a pretty good target for your Deadwood Dirges as well, because you can't always get all the red arcane cussings that you want. That card's pretty contested, but Deadwood Dirging a Sigil of Deadwood is also really good. Yeah, so I think all these rune chant makers are good. I think they're good regardless of whether or not you can actually turn on Florian's text box. I think if you can turn on Florian's text box, you would prefer to, but I have drafted good Florian decks like in 3.0 that don't turn on Florian's text box. I don't think it's mandatory, and I think that basically if you can decompose, you definitely want these cards, but if you can't decompose, you can still play all these cards and they're still good.
Mm-hmm. I agree. You want to talk about some of the other cards then? Mostly the Earth stuff?
Yeah, so Decomposers are good. I don't think this is a surprise to anybody who's been drafting a bunch of this format. The decompose cards are just super, super contested. You need them to turn your hero ability on. The chillings are particularly premium, but I think you kind of just take what you can get, honestly. It's kind of where I'm at with this format is like, if there's like a reasonable decompose card, I'm taking it. And if I'm already Earth, I'm like committed to Earth already, and there's like a mediocre decompose card, and I don't have very many, I'm just taking it.
Yeah, same. At this point, I'm just like, oh, yellow decompose. Does it do anything? No. Well, decompose itself is the payoff, so I'll take this card.
Even just like blue blossoming decay, it's like a little bit on the junky side, but sometimes I'm just like, I just need my deck to work. You know, I just need to be able to get my hero ability online. I have a couple rune chant makers. I'm already in Florian. Like, just need decomposers. The worst case is a blue. Like, and I have a couple extras. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. So I think basically every decompose card is just like pretty good. Obviously, the reds are better. I think Cadaverous Tilling is like probably the best of the bunch, but they're all good.
Yeah, I think Tilling is pushed for constructed, I think, is what it feels like to me. And even if this card was like 1 power or less, I think this card would have been like the one of the most powerful cards in the set.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just sort of like an above rate card that also progresses your game plan to turn on your hero ability and get like even more value. So it's like super good. And all the colors are good. Like the red 3 for 8 is obviously crazy, but like a yellow 3 for 7 is still very, very good. And a blue that swings for 6 is just like also obscene. So
The last Earth card to actually talk about would be like Helm of Ligum Vitae. Is that how do you say that card?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, this is like a premium Earth equipment. Like you really need this headpiece. If you don't, I guess you don't need it, but it will drastically improve your Flurry deck if you have it, because just blocking with this card for one to be able to decompose is like a big upside on this card. And honestly, at this point, I'm kind of more happy to block with this early so that I can make sure I can decompose. Mostly against like Ocilio. Often just block with this card as soon as I can and make sure that it's in my graveyard, because otherwise it gets stuck in the it just gets stuck in your equipment zone, and sometimes you need to decompose and you can't because it's stuck there. So it's great that like it is an earth card that you can decompose. And in the times where you don't have to block with this card to decompose, it gets even crazier because then it starts blocking for 2 for no reason.
Yeah, Helm of Lignum Vitae is a very, very powerful piece of equipment. So I agree with everything you said. Other Earth cards to look out for: Harvest Season and Strong Yield. The red ones are very, very premium. They just pair with Rotwood Reaper. They cost 1. They turn on Rotwood Reaper for 4, and then you either gain 3 life or you get +3 attack on your next turn. So there are like basically 3 for 7s, but some of the value goes to the next turn. They also notably have Go Again, which ends up being really important into the Wizards. You want to have Go Again so you can convert your big hands, and these are a nice way to do it that just fits into your game plan, in addition to being Earth cards that go to the graveyard to help you decompose without being below rate. Like these cards are super, super good. I think Harvest Season is probably a little bit better just because I think life gain's slightly better than damage just in general in this set, but they're both super good.
And the next card on the list, you just write 3 for 7s. And we already talked about how Harvest Season and Strong Yield are kind of like 3 for 7s. And just the regular 3 for 7s are also good, right? Like, what's the Runeblade one called? Sorry. What's the name of that card?
There's just like a whole bunch of them. Like you can play like Findle's Fighting Spirit and the generics. You can play Tongue Tied. That's probably the worst of them, but it's still fine.
Oh,
You can
Vantage
play,
Point.
yeah, you can play Vantage Point. You can play Splintering Deadwood is really good. That card's kind of insane in Florian. It has the like when you play it, you can destroy an aura and make 2 rune chants. Or sorry, make a rune chant, but it's 2 if you're Florian. And then if it hits, you can destroy an aura and make 2 rune chants. So that card has synergy with like Sigil of Deadwood and Deadwood Dirt and Arcane Cussing and, you know, just all that stuff. So
Yeah, 3 for 7's good. Wins fatigue math.
and when your deck is super good at going to fatigue and has the best weapon, that you're very interested in just progressing that game plan, basically. The last piece that you need for a fatigue plan in this set is life gain. Every hero has arcane damage to some degree. The wizard's probably a little more so on average. So you just need some life gain to stay in the game long enough to grind people out. I think that it is possible for Florian to just kill people with damage, but the vast majority of the time you end up fatiguing. And it is fatiguing by damage. You're not just sitting there and purely blocking, you're like attacking every single turn. But usually I win by fatigue.
I think there are Florian decks that can win without the the life gain, but I think the best Florian decks, or the Florian decks that feel like people can never beat, are the ones with life gain, right? I think that might be a difference of like how to think about this would be like there are good Florian decks that like just like makes rune chance and like does like ridiculous amounts of damage, but I feel like those Florian decks could like lose to like an Acilio that like booms them on turn two, or an Aurora deck that like just kind of pops off and plays all their cards every turn. But the variants that have like these like strong life gain cards that like, or a lot of life gain in them, feels like even if you're playing against like the Nutted Acilio deck that like tries to like 22 you with Arcane by turn three, you just like gain 6 life and they don't win anymore, right? Like it's just like, and the more life gain you have, the harder it is for all of these heroes to kill you. So it's life gain is good in this format.
Yeah, since you have the late game inevitability, life gain just kind of like shuts off ways for decks to kill you, and you also just don't need that many cards in the arcane damage rune champ package to really get there. Like you like Florian decks like just like can have a small arcane damage package and still just do like 15 damage turns. Like I don't know, you have like 3 rune champ makers and you just line them up together and you're kind of set. Like you don't need to go too far out of your way to have really strong turns.
Yeah, I agree with that. Then I guess before we do the overrated and underrated cards, do you want to, as usual, just go over the key cards real quickly so people can refresh on what they are?
Yeah, so your summary is you want rune chant makers, so Arcane Seed's Life, Malefic Incantation, Runehold Release, Deadwood Dirge, and Cussing in red, and then Sigil of Deadwood are the ones you're looking for. Harvest Season and Strong Yield, especially in red, are really good. Yellows and blues are serviceable. Decompose cards, all of them are good. Tilling's probably the best, but take what you can get. Earth equipment, but especially the Helm of Lignum Vitae is super good. Remember, don't be afraid to block and use it as graveyard fill. 3 for 7s, any of them. Some of them are, I think, obviously better than others if they block 3 or have additional effects, but 3 for 7s are good. And life gain, very good.
So I guess we'll move on and talk about the cards that we think are kind of overrated. It's kind of I kind of had a hard time just thinking of overrated cards in Florian because like everything is so reasonable in the deck.
I agree. I don't think anything's like super bad. One that I had was Oath of the Arknight, specifically like the red. I think that people see this and they're like, this is a really good card. And I think it's a lot better in Aurora where your weapon costs 1 and you're playing a bunch of 0 cost attacks. This just like most of your attacks cost 3 and your weapon costs 2. And anytime you're pitching 2 blues to play this is like not very good. I guess you could be a Florian deck that plays like if you're the Runeblade Florian, maybe you can play this with like the 1 for 4s and you go like Oath of the Arknight into hit the high notes and like that's fine. But I think most of the time you just like don't really want to be in those 1 for 4s because like you just have so many 3 for 7s that like why would you play like a 1 for 6 that you have to like combine with cards and like go through all these hoops to make it work when you could just like play a nice 3 for 7.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I guess the only times that I think you would kind of want Oath of the Arknight is like if you're lacking in rune chant generation. It is kind of nice to have like 1 or 2 cards in your deck that has a way to make rune chants. I think maybe like slotting this in when you don't have enough arcane damage might be a good option to like close games out.
Yeah, it's also go again. So like into the wizards, if you don't have go again, it's pretty good, and it also just blocks 3. So like this is still a good card. I just don't think you need to pick it highly, basically, but it's still a good card.
I was just thinking of like cards that like I wasn't really happy with seeing in like the Earth pile, and the card that came up to me for the overrated card was like Earth Form.
Yeah.
Earth Form might be the worst Earth card in the whole Earth pile for Florian. It's kind of crazy to think that though. It's like Earth form might be the worst Earth card, and obviously not including the Majestics. I'm not sure if like Earth's Embrace is that good,
No, I don't think so.
but like from the commons and the rares, I feel like Earth form is like the Earth card you want the least actually. It's kind of crazy because every other Earth card is just like either above average or pretty strong in Florian. And then we have Earth form. It's like, man, this card blocks for 2. I guess I have to attack with this card, is what it feels like.
And I think the other problem that Florian runs into is that most of the Runeblade non-attacks, and I think all of the Earth non-attacks besides the Majestics, block 2. So you end up just like A, not having that many non-attacks in your deck, and B, not often not even wanting to block with them. Like your non-attacks are often like you have these like block 2 non-attacks that you can upgrade, but they might be your Deadwood Dirges and your Arcane Cussings, and upgrading them to 3 blocks isn't really good because you kind of want to play those cards. So you're really not like, even though this is a 3 for 7 with upside and you can still play it, the upside's pretty marginal. I think the embodiment of Earth is way more relevant in Verdance than it is in Florian.
Yeah, I agree with you. That said, I think Earth form's also still pretty decent. Mostly the red one, yeah.
Yeah, it's still a red 3 for 7 that's an Earth card, so you still pick that card pretty highly, but I agree, it is like surprisingly disappointing.
Yeah, I mainly put it here because I just wanted to like make a comment that this might be the worst Earth card for Florian, which is kind of crazy. And I think this might be the reason also why I tend to think that Florian's almost always gonna have some kind of Earth in it, because like all the Earth cards in almost every color is so decent in him that you just like get past like a yellow Earth card and you're like, oh, this is fine, and you start picking it.
Yeah, so true. All right, let's move into underrated. The first one is Meet and Greet Red. I see this go kind of late sometimes. This card in Florian is nice. I think that the key thing is, first off, it's a 3 block. So you can just block 3 with it. But especially if you have like Runehold Release or like a little bit of Arcane Generation, going like pop Runehold Release, swing Meet and Greet for 4. If the rune chant hits, this gets go again, and I've made an aura so I can Rotwood Reaper for 4, and I'm also threatening the on hit, is like really, really awkward. And sometimes even if they like give you the sanctuary, you still have to deal with the 4 breakpoint on the meet and greet, and if it hits, you still get the rune chant. And if you have Florian's online, it's 2 rune chants. Like this play is just really strong, both when Florian's online and when it's not online. And I've just found meet and greet super, super good. And when it's not good, you just block with it for 3.
I have nothing else to say about that. I think this card's pretty good. The next underrated card would be, I guess, like the blue auras. All the blue auras are pretty good in Florian, and that's mostly because like you end up pitching them early, and then you play them on your second cycle pitch stack when people only have blues left, and you play like a Harvest Season blue, a Strong Yield blue, Sigil Earth, Sigil Fiando, just any of these blue auras into just your weapon is so reasonable, right? Like it's so hard to block a 4, mostly when you're at like 3, like single digit life. It's just strong enough that your opponent has to block, and like they can't really keep 4 cards hand even if you play these cards.
Yeah. And most of them give you 1 value. So you end up getting like the swing for 4 and then a 1. It's basically like a blue 3 for 5, except no other hero really cares about the cards. So you just get to pick them like super, super late for free.
Yeah, and it just fills out your deck really nicely.
Yeah. So you're like not going out of your way to get these cards, but you just like get them late and they're like really good.
An underrated card that I have next would be Yellow Blossoming Decay. I think this card actually goes around too late, too often. I think people now understand that the Decompose is going to be a premium and you want to get like as many as you can get. But I still see people passing Yellow Blossoming Decay. And this card hits for a breakpoint of 4, which isn't that much of a difference from 5. And it gains you a life, which is like even if it's just 1 point, it is a little bit of buffer against these wizards. And it's just good against the Aurora as well, because you end up fatiguing a lot of your opponents out as Florian. And instead of doing that one extra point of damage, gaining that 1 point can sometimes save you a card in the future turns. And I think yellow Blossoming Medicaid is quite low on people's pick lists right now. And I think it's totally serviceable.
Yeah, I also think yellow pitch is pretty good. Like it just plays a lot of stuff. Actually, it swings Rotwood Reaper if you have a zero cost aura to pair with it. It can swing Strength of Four Seasons once Florian's online. You can play Fertile Ground off of it. So I wouldn't say you're like necessarily like trying to get this to your second cycle, but sometimes you just end up paying for something, and it's totally reasonable too.
In the same vein as like Yellow Blossoming Decay, Rootbound Carapace Blue is a card I think is underrated for sure. This card's not great, and you obviously just want the yellow or the red one over it. But when you get past the Rootbound Carapace Blue, I'm kind of happy because like this is a card that's like a blue that like you can like pitch pretty consistently, or you can just like block with it and just use it to activate Florian's ID. You can also just arsenal it and block for two, which is completely reasonable against most heroes. Because like Aurora comes in for two with her weapon and you just block with a Rootbound Carapace and decompose, and you turn your Florian ID on, and you're just kind of winning at this point. So yeah, I think Rootbound Carapace Blue is still underrated at this point, at least.
Agreed. My next one is Arcane Polarities Blue and Yellow. I think that people understand red's really good. Blue and yellow is still really good. I really like blue arcane polarity. I think I play it in like almost every hero. I'm like happy to have like the first one. And having like access to a second one in sideboard is like actually pretty sweet. I think it's like the other thing about this card is like you can just pick a couple of these up and then you play against an Acilio and you're like, I have these blue and yellow arcane polarities. I'm just gonna like bring this into my deck. And like I think the sideboard, especially I think the sideboard in this format is in general is really important, but especially for the Earth heroes, if you have like a bunch of life gain, like yeah, you don't want to play like a bunch of blue and yellow arcane polarities into Aurora. But if you can take them out and then bring them in against the wizards, your deck is so much better than if you can't do that.
That makes a lot of sense. And I guess a easy way to think about it is yellow arcane polarity blanks one of their red zaps.
And doesn't take an action point.
That's insane.
Yeah, it's like actually super good. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, they chose like they used the premium pick to pick up a red zap, and then you got this like yellow arcane polarity at like pick 9, pick 11, somewhere in that range. And you're just like, I blank your first pick. Wow.
Yeah, it is pretty good. So some underrated cards for you, but honestly, like almost all the cards are good in Florian, which is probably why he's so good. Let's talk about gameplay. For gameplay, usually you're trying to decompose to get Florian online and then do a bunch of arcane with rune chants. Often this looks like second cycle pitch stack. Sometimes it can look like arsenaling a card and then waiting for the second card. So I've had decks where I have like exactly one dirge and one cussing, and I'll be like, I'm a little over halfway through my deck and I drew this Deadwood Dirge. I'm just going to arsenal it because I'm going to draw into my arcane cussing. Or like if you know you pitched a Sigil of Deadwood, you can try and line that up. You're just trying to like line up these kind of like 2-card combos to make some rune chants and swing a bunch of tempo and damage in the late game.
Actually work towards decomposing. If that means like over blocking, like maybe like blocking for 7 into a 6 by blocking with an extra earth card early might be pretty advantageous play for you. So then you can decompose one turn earlier and kind of guarantee that like you get to decompose when it's natural for you to do so. Because the worst case scenario for Florian would be to be forced to like save your decompose card and IP penalty yourself when you kind of didn't have to if you overblocked earlier in the game.
And then in addition to this, like decompose early and then set up rune chance late, you also have the backup win con of fatigue and just maximizing the value of your hand and all the cards in your deck and getting that Rotwood Reaper value in over and over again. A lot of games you win by fatigue just in general. And if you don't decompose or your deck isn't able to decompose, you can just play like a Rotwood Reaper fatigue pile, and honestly that deck is really good too. If you have enough life gain and good enough card quality, that deck is super good. I've definitely 3-0'd pods with it before.
Yeah, the block for six, pitch a blue, harvest season, Rotwood Reaper. Ugh, that's so unbeatable.
Yeah, it's just like a super simple strategy that beats a lot of decks.
Yeah, like, there is no counterplay, honestly. It's just like, oh, I attack you, they block for six. Pitch a blue, harvest season, four, and you're like, wow, that was so good, and now I can't really kill them, and then they just keep on doing it over and over and over again, and you just run out of cards because, like, that's what they're good at.
Yep. Yep. Okay, we can move into the deck outline. You want 12 to 15 blues. You're playing a bunch of expensive cards. I think that the better your blues are, the more blues you can run. So if you have like blue Strength of the Four Seasons, blue, I don't know, cadaverous tillings, these high power blues that are almost play like reds, you can play a higher blue count. If you have less of those, you can play a lower blue count. Make sure you don't have too many random two blocks, especially ones that don't like make auras. You really don't want those. But yeah, 12 to 15 blues. How many decompose cards do you want? And earth cards?
Honestly, as many as you can get at this point. But if you have like 5 to 6 red ones, I think your Florian deck is like considered pretty nutted. And you can honestly have like a 2 to 3 decompose Florian deck, and I've been impressed with those decks too.
Yeah, I think if you have the life gain to back it up, you really can just kind of lean on a couple decomposers. More is obviously better. Yeah, I would say that for me, three, I really want three because it gives you like if you have two, you have to play those two decomposers, and sometimes it just lines up a little bit awkward. And just having like a little bit of flexibility with a third makes such a big difference to the deck. And more from there just obviously improves it even more. And then in terms of the earth count, I think you usually want around 12 to 15 earth cards, assuming you're going the decompose route, and then you want some three blocks in addition to that.
Yeah, yeah. The you can play less Earth cards if you have the helmet.
Yes, yes. The helmet, I was going to say that. Like, I've played like 11 Earth card decks with the helmet, and it just makes such a difference because you can get that decompose fill like on board right away.
That's also another thing to think about with the helmet is if you have a lot of Earth cards in your deck, and then you know you're gonna have a pretty easy time filling your graveyard with Earth cards, then you can save your helmet. But then if you know you're on the lower end of the Earth cards, you want to use your helmet as early as possible. And the same reason, if you have less decomposed cards, you want to use your helmet early, so then you can make sure that you can decompose when you draw your decomposed cards. And then the more decomposers you have, the more you can afford to wait on your helmet and block with it when it is at its premium or its best.
Yep. And then after the decomposers and the earth cards, you want rune chant generation. We kind of talked about this in the key cards. Honestly, rune chant generation is just like super good. It's even better if you decompose, but it is good in general. And you usually want at least a little bit of rune chant generation. But I'd say like generally more is better. I'd probably rather decompose and have a little bit less rune chant generation than just like only rune chant generation. But yeah, generally more rune chant generation is better, especially if it is like the cards that we talked about in the key cards section, and they're usually pretty contested. So I think it's hard to wind up with like too much rune chant generation. You usually get it where you can.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Next up will be the go again cards, right? And this is basically just to beat the wizards that will prevent you from converting your cards, your Ruble cards, that typically is supposed to block for 3. Honestly, just like cards like Fertile Ground, like life gain, instants that gain life, or cards like Rune Rager Swarm that gains go again, the Cussing Dirge combo, even cards like Oath. We said that card was overrated, but against the Wizards, anything with go again, premium. If you can convert your 4 card hand when they don't attack you, is the way you beat the Wizards. So you want to be able to do that every turn.
Yeah, and I think if you're actively looking to pick up some of these cards during your draft, especially if your draft is going well, is super, super important. Sometimes rather than taking like a slight upgrade to your deck, getting a premium sideboard card that lets you address like some kind of strategy that you might encounter that might otherwise be hard for you to beat is actually just more equity. So don't be afraid to pick up these cards, especially if you just like like sometimes you're like, I have 22 good cards that I'm going into pack 3. Like, I just need to fill out my deck. I'll pick up the premium cards and I'm going to get some sideboard cards and make sure I can cover all my bases. And I think the more that you approach this set with that mindset, the better you'll do. And notably, like all of the life gain cards have go again. Fertile Ground, Fruits of the Forest doesn't have go again, but you can discard it as an instant. Arcane Polarity is an instant. Harvest Season has go again. So like all of the life gain without fail has go again. So that's part of the reason that we say the life gain is so premium. Is obviously it helps you against the wizard decks, but it also helps you convert those hands. So it kind of does like double duty against those wizard decks.
I guess the question would be like, how much life gain do you want? Like, is there like a cap that you want of how much life gain cards you have in your deck?
I don't really think so. I think you want like at least 12. More is better. I feel like 20 20 feels like kind of an important breakpoint. Like when you get to like 20, I think the wizard decks are like have a hard time beating you. If they have a really good one, they can get there, but 20 life gain is like a very, very nice number, I find. And honestly, you can play more. I've seen Florian decks that gain like 30 life and they are still good. I guess like the only way you could maybe run into a trap here is if you draft like, I don't know, like your deck is like only Fertile Grounds and like, yeah, your deck's going to be bad. But like so long as it's like reasonable and you like still have threats to present and you're not just like drawing a bunch of Fertile Grounds and you can't decompose, like your deck's probably good. So like not really. You can't really have too much life gain, I don't think.
Then I guess the last cards is lots of 3-for-7s or auras that kind of pseudo are, blue 3-for-5s, or you know what I mean.
Big attacks. Make them run out of cards.
Yeah, good fatigue math cards.
Yeah. So summarize that deck outline for you. You want 12 to 15 blues, 3 to 6 decomposers with 12 to 15 earth cards, assuming you're going the decompose route. You can go lower if you aren't. You want some rune chant generation, especially if you're decomposing. Those are the cards we talked about. So your Dirge and Cussings, your Arcane Seeds Life, your Malefic Incantations, and your Sigils of Deadwood. Runehold Release as well, of course. You want enough go again to beat the wizard decks. That can be either life gain cards. Any of them, honestly, are pretty playable. Except for maybe like Sigil of Findle. That one kind of sucks. It's still playable, but it's not that good. And then you want like Rune Rager Swarms, Cussings, Dirge, Oath, and anything with go again, so you can convert your hands against those wizard decks is really, really good. You want some life gain, ideally 12 or more. We talked about like 20 being a really nice number to hit if you can. And then lots of 3-for-7s, auras, or just big attacks. You get 6 power attacks, that's fine. Put it in the deck. Just big attacks are good. Nothing too complicated. I think that Florian plays kind of like the most fundamental flesh and blood of any of the heroes in this set, so you don't need anything too fancy. Just play the good, like the good value cards, and then gain some life so you don't die to the wizards, and you have a pretty good deck, honestly.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway from here would be the sideboard. I think that's what you've been talking about, and I think that might be like the number one thing that gives you the most amount of edge in the current Rosetta format is understanding the decks that exist in the format. So basically, the decks that we talked about in the last 3 episodes, and be aware that you kind of require different cards to beat each of those decks, and have enough cards in your deck or your sideboard put together that can answer each of these decks. And the better you can do that, the stronger your Florian deck is.
Yeah, and often the way I'm thinking about this is like, oh, I have like a bunch of auras and big attacks, so I'm really good at beating fatigue. But maybe I need some 3 blocks so I can beat the aggro decks. And maybe I need some more life gain to beat the wizard decks. Or, maybe you have a really good wizard verdance deck that can kind of bully the earth decks. Maybe you should be taking some life gain so you can win the wizard mirrors and a couple big attacks so you have some more game into the auroras. It's stuff like that. And depending on the cards you have in your deck already, this is going to shift over time. But you kind of want to make sure you have some of each of these pieces that we've talked about, and you would rather have a little bit of a balance of all of them than just like a deck that only has 3 for 7s, or a deck that only has life gain, or a deck that only makes rune chance. You want like a little bit of all of it, and that kind of gives you the most tools to deal with everything, and get a feel for like what the right balance of all these parts is. And it doesn't always have to be the same. You can lean more one way or more another, and you probably will because every draft is different. But you do want some kind of mix and some kind of balance that works.
Okay, then I guess the common question in every limited format is, do you want to go first or second? And I guess that will be for Florian this time. Are you typically going first or second with them right now?
I think first almost everywhere. The Earth Mirrors usually almost always go to fatigue. I'm kind of assuming that they do. So I want to go first. And if they're on Earth Verdants, then you also want to go, or sorry, if they're on Wizard Verdants, you also want to go first to save your Sanctuary. So just go first into the Earth Heroes. Against Acilio, also go first, save your Sanctuary. Maybe you can gain a bit of life, get some graveyard fill. All of that is important. And then against Aurora, I think I want to go second and just like hit them, get some damage early, and just try and get ahead in that value trade because usually it's more of a value centric game.
Okay, that makes sense. Then, nothing much to add there. Matchups. We want to talk about the like hero to hero matchups next.
Yeah, so I can talk about Florian. I think against Florian, you want to try and maximize the value of every card in your deck. I actually have a Florian draft on our YouTube channel. That is available for free that you can check out. I kind of go through the draft and go through the gameplay, and I talk about this idea a lot. But it's just basically like you want to play your big attacks where you can. You want to keep your threats in deck when you can, so long as you don't fall too far behind. This is part of the reason Fertile Ground is so good. You can sometimes pitch like a yellow, like a reasonable yellow that you can play on your second cycle and then gain like 4 or 5 life. And that's kind of like a way to play another like 1 card 5 that you otherwise wouldn't be able to, because like if you block with the card is like a 1 card 3, right, in terms of like the total damage in your deck. So that's really what you're trying to maximize, and you just need to make sure you don't get too low to die to rune chance. Pay attention to their pitch stack. If they have a whole bunch of rune chance in their pitch stack, you really need to keep a life buffer, especially if you don't have the life gain to deal with it. And then managing your pitch stack is also important. So setting up those key plays with your rune chance or with your big attacks is really powerful. And I think Florian kind of maybe has the most room to like set up sweet second cycle stuff because he wants to play to late games and there's so much synergy in his card pool. Do you agree? Is Florian like the best second cycle or like the most common second cycle deck in this format?
He's the easiest for sure. It kind of is like natural to like. I typically end up pitching like a red strengths of the four season and try and pair it with like a one cost. So then I can go like one cost into strength for 8, and that typically pushes the Florian mirror out in a favor for me, so they can't really come back after that. So I like doing something like that. So even things like playing like arcane cussing into a red strength of the four season hitting for 8, they have to kind of give me 3 cards and then I can convert the arcane cussing next turn, things like that. It's I like that kind of play. So pairing it even with like something like a strong yield and then playing strength of the four season for 8, making sure they have to block with 3 cards and then come in for another big attack that I pitch stacked on the next turn cycle. So things like
Yeah, and this is kind of the reason that like the yellow blossoming decay is also nice. If this is in your second cycle and you can like play a 1 for 3 aura into like a blossoming decay, it's not as good as a strength for 4 seasons, but still pretty reasonable.
Oh yeah, very reasonable, very reasonable. Just like being able to force damage through is kind of nice, and the more you can leak damage, the more impactful the rune chance becomes. So you really want to come in for the breakpoints of like fours, the sevens, and obviously the ones with the rune chance. So that's typically how you like leak damage against Florian.
What about Verdants?
I think the Verdance matchup is pretty similar, right, to the Florian one. You just kind of need to maximize your hands and make sure you keep a life buffer, I think is the most important. Verdance is not going to have a weapon at the end of the game. So even if you are on parity with cards near the end of the game, that typically means that you're going to be winning the fatigue math. So you can As long as you're not like 3 cards or 4 cards behind, you should be fine to fatigue out Verdance near the end of the game. So I
Yeah.
think blocking a little bit more aggressively for their big attacks is a way to make sure you don't lose the game randomly to a random burn spell.
Yeah, agree with that. And then save the Sanctuary of Aria for the surge effects. Like often I'd rather just, especially if you know you have life gain in your deck, just like don't Sanctuary turn 0, eat their 4 arcane. It's fine, honestly. Like it doesn't sound like it should be fine, but the game goes more than long enough, and if you have enough life gain in your deck, it just doesn't really matter that much. And what you want to save it for is the surge effects. Sometimes it's go again in a critical spot. Very often, especially if you think the game is about fatigue, it is making sure that they can't get off Perennial Aether Bloom and start looping it. So saving your Sanctuary and also your Well Grounded, if you have it to stop the Aether Blooms, is like really key in this matchup. I have won a number of games that I don't think I should have won as Verdance just because I can like find a way to bait out that Sanctuary of Aria and then I start Aether Bloom looping them and I win.
That makes sense. That makes sense. The spots of like making sure when to use Sanctuary is probably the number one way to lose or win games with against Verdance's Florian. If the Verdance is playing like a wizard pile, you just need to have enough life gain and go against, right? Like if you can't convert your hands, it's typically how you lose that matchup.
Yep, I agreed with all of that. I remember there was a draft where one of our patrons actually was visiting from out of town. He just like happened to be in Vancouver and came to one of our armories, and I think we were like both on wizard decks and he was on Florian and he just like smashed both of us. I think we both actually had like quite good wizard decks, but his deck was really good at just going like 7 gain 3, 7 gain 3, 7 gain 3, and it was just you just ran out of cards before you could do enough damage to actually kill him. Was like basically how it worked out in both of our games. Like I watched your game and it was exactly the same as mine. I think I was on Acilio and you were on Verdance.
No, I was on Florian because that pod was it was a 4 Florian 2 Acilio pod.
Oh, you know what it was? Eric was on Acilio and had the same experience as me, and then yeah, you were on Florian. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because I don't think I played him. Did I play him? I'm not sure
No,
now.
no, I'm thinking of Eric. Yeah, it was 4 Florian, 2 Acilio, and both the Acilio decks were actually very good, and we both just lost like the exact same game of Flesh and Blood almost. Like I had like Comet Storm Shock and stuff, and it just like kind of didn't matter. Like he just kept gaining life every single turn and swinging 7, and I was like, yeah, I got him low. The game was like kind of close, but it was just really good.
Yeah, because I remember that was the game. That was the draft where I played against you in the last round, I think, and you just killed me on 3 turns.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you just like Comet Storm, and I'm like, oh, okay. Yo, no, you're not the one with 2 Comet Storms. Eric was the one with two Comet Storms.
Yeah, I had one Comet Storm. Yeah, we had like 2 insane Acilio decks, even though it was a 6-person pod. It was kind of a funny draft.
Yeah, things like that can happen because they're rares, right, and not majestics.
And we're talking about Acilio there, but a lot of that transfers over to the Arcane Verdance list. I think Arcane Verdance and Acilio share a lot of similarities. So
Yeah. Then do you want to talk about Cilio first?
yeah, we can kind of talk about it next. So once again, go first, save Sanctuary for surge effects. Here you're not really worried about the Aether Bloom. You're probably more worried about like go agains in key spots or what's the draw to? Overflow the Aether Well. Those are probably the effects you want to stop against Acilio or just get a ton of value out of it to not die. Keep your life total high, block where you can, especially to fill your graveyard. I have overblocked with the helmet just to get a earth card in. Like they're attacking for 3, I give a 3 block and I just slam the helmet on the table because I'm like, I don't want to figure out if you're attacking again or not. I just need to get this earth card in so I can decompose, and that's totally reasonable.
Yeah. Acilio is one matchup where you could fall into the spot where you can't decompose as Florian because they'll never attack you for the rest of the game. I guess same for Verdant. So this goes for both the wizards. Just whenever you can, overblocking might be just good, mostly if it's to fill earth cards. And in this matchup, like cards like Sigil of Earth becomes pretty premium because just play it, put it in your graveyard so you can decompose and turn on Florian. And once you turn on Florian, your rune chant makers are kind of better zaps than the wizard variants, so you kind of win the arcane race that way. So turning on Florian is a if you care about turning on Florian, you should be working pretty hard to turn on Florian, mostly in the early game.
Agreed. Something else I want to say about these wizard matchups is I think it is generally right to play your fertile grounds first cycle for 2 life gain if they just like hit you with arcane and you otherwise can't convert. Even if it's like a red one and you're like, I have decompose, maybe I can get to 5. You just basically like if you end up intellect penaltying and like not drawing cards, you don't draw into your other life gain as quickly, and you also don't draw into your decompose as quickly, and you just kind of like can fall behind. And I think that you're actually just supposed to play the card like almost always. I'm sure there's exceptions, but usually you're supposed to play it out. And it's an earth card. It helps you decompose, and it helps you like one of the important concepts in these matchups is not only are you hoping to convert your hand, I think you're also just trying to cycle your hand to draw all your life gain and decompose as fast as you can. You like don't be afraid to like overpitch and just keep digging to find more cards. That's totally fine, and you'll have some reds in your second cycle. So if you ever get there, you have pressure. But it really you just want to find all the life gain in your deck as fast as possible.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think a good way to say what you just said would be like, I think you can get punished more often for keeping a fertile ground in your hand than the other way around.
And I think like maybe the big exception is if you can just arsenal it, that's okay. Like there's nothing wrong with like if you can arsenal and you like don't have any other reasonable card to arsenal, that's fine. And I actually like having it in arsenal because it just means that you can use it to help convert a hand later on. The auras are great in arsenal for the same reason. But yeah, don't you can't like really sit there and like sandbag it. And similarly, I think that you shouldn't be trying to like second cycle it and be like, I want to get the like 4 or 5 out of my yellow or red. Just fire it off because you're not gonna like how do I put this? If your deck doesn't have very much life gain, you're not gonna get to second cycle. And if your deck has a lot of life gain, then you have a lot of life gain and you just need to not die. So you don't need to get the maximum value out of it. You just need to not die. So I think you just always want to play it for 2. And like I've seen people be like, oh no, I want to get a second cycle. And then they just like die because they didn't gain life. And I was like, yep, that 2 life would have been real good right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah, but basically your whole plan is just keep your life total high, gain life, and keep sending attacks, and eventually they'll run out of cards. But that's basically how you play against the wizards. It sounds kind of basic, but honestly, that's because it is. It's a lot of how you draft your deck, I think, more so than the gameplay.
Yeah, makes sense. Then the last hero to talk about would be Aurora, the other Rune Blade in the set.
This feels the most like playing a normal game of Flesh and Blood of any of the Florian matchups. And by that, I just mean like you want to go second, which is usually the default, but we talked about all the other matchups, you go first. You're just trying to play a value game. And by that, I mean you're maximizing the value of your hands rather than the total deck value. Generally, your deck is just worth more than theirs because you're playing earth cards, they're playing lightning cards, you have a better weapon. Like you usually win on fatigue kind of no matter what, unless you just get like stuck into a spot where you have to block out. But if that's the case, it's because you lost the value game. So you should really just be focusing on winning the value game and do that, and just make sure you're not overblocking too much, wasting all your threats. You need to keep attacking back, but yeah, try and play that value game with them, and that is how you win. And your weapon does more deck damage than their weapon, so you'll get there.
Yeah, I think a good way to think about this is like, imagine a Aurora playing a blue lightning attack with go again, and then swinging their sword, 3 to 4 damage, and then you play your blue aura and then swing your weapon. That's also just 4, but then you also get like the 1 point extra. So you're just like you're kind of winning the value game by playing one blue over there, like one lightning card almost like every time. So if you guys are kind of like equal or like even on cards, you're definitely winning the fatigue race. And like Aurora probably needs like 3 to 4 cards on you in like the second cycle to be able to like win the actual fatigue race.
Yeah. And maybe an important note, maybe we should do an episode on fatigue. I've been thinking about this for a little bit, but an important note is that life total should also be counted. So you can count every 3 life as roughly a card. So if you are even on cards, but you're up 12 life, it's like you're up 4 cards because 12 divided by 4. Sorry, yeah, 12 divided by 3 is 4.
And this math kind of falls apart too, right? Like, I guess we'll talk about it more in that episode, but as the game goes later and later, like you can almost count as like 2 life is worth 1 card. Because like cards start just naturally being worth less and less and less, mostly when people start, only playing blues, which just have less offensive value, right?
Okay. I thought Florian was going to be a short episode because he's like kind of simpler and a lot of people know him, but there was still kind of a lot to talk about. I think Rosetta is just a hard set, and I guess Florian just has like a lot going on in terms of like there's a lot of different cards you can play, and there's just like some important things to prioritize, and some of the deck damage and stuff is important. So I guess there was a lot to talk about this episode, but yeah, it did end up being a bit of a longer episode. So I think we're gonna wrap it up here. Thank you all for listening. Hope this helps you out if you have any draft ProQuests coming up. And I hope you all have a good rest of your day and a good luck at your PQs, regardless of if they're draft or CC. If you want to get in touch with us, you can find us on Twitter. Jay is at UAToJ. I'm at Ukili Bender, or you can email us directly at onthebobble@gmail.com. You can also get in touch with us via Discord. We have a Patreon Discord, so you can check us out on Patreon if you're interested in that as well. Link should be in the description below on YouTube. Yeah, that's going to wrap us up. Thanks for listening. Good luck, everyone. See you next time. So I've been drafting. I've been testing a bunch for Worlds. That has been some amount of draft, actually a lot of draft, honestly, but also quite a bit of CC. And in particular, I've been working on Dash.io this week. And we mentioned that there's like the Patreon list and stuff up, but yeah, Dash.io has been my focus. I think a lot of teams are focused on Dash.io right now. I gotta say, when I first played the deck, I thought it was like insane broken, like everybody seems to be saying on Twitter. And then I played the deck like 5 more games and I was like, huh. This deck's good, but it definitely has some weaknesses. I know you've been playing Dash.io. Have you felt the same way?
Yeah, I haven't played that many games of Dash.io, but I played a couple and against somebody who's like kind of practiced into Dash.io. And man, when there was a turn where I had to like IP penalty myself for 4 cards, and I'm just like, this deck is not it. Like it's I just kind of died, and both games I actually lost. They were kind of close games, but you know, if I guess if they didn't have like the sideboard tech or practice into it, the games wouldn't have been close. But now that these better players do have practice, oh, it feels so bad playing this deck.
Yeah. I'll say that like the kind of weaknesses I see in the deck. So the deck's like really good in the aggro mirrors. I think that is true. And when the deck gets to do its thing, it's pretty crazy. It can easily do like 30 plus damage turns. It is pretty wild. The turns also just like look really impressive. Like sometimes you're like high octane, draw a card, boost, pistol, cerebellum processor, draw some more cards, spark of genius, like, and you just like keep going, and it's just actually kind of absurd. Like it doesn't even really look like Flesh and Blood in terms of just like, like usually Flesh and Blood decks play like a 5 card hand, and that's what they do. But like Dash is like, I played like 10 cards and I shot you with my pistol 5 times. So it is pretty wild and super powerful. I don't want to say that she isn't a powerful deck. She absolutely is, and when she does her thing, it is pretty crazy. That being said, Warmonger's Diplomacy is really good against her. Like High Octane and Spark of Genius are some of your best cards and fuel a lot of your most powerful turns. And Cerebellum Processor is another best card, but to activate it, you need to do a non-attack, and if you do non-attacks, you're not attacking. You also can't play any items, so yeah, Warmongers is really good into her, especially once the Cerebellum's on board. And then she also just kind of like burns through her deck with some amount of Tekla Foundry cards, some amount of boost, and just drawing and playing a bunch of cards. She fatigues herself like super, super, super fast. And she has a bunch of no blocks, so she's like kind of vulnerable to disruption. Erase Face hits her, CNC hits her, Weakest Link hits her. She cares about action points, so like I'm sure like Victor with Spinal Crush would hit her. News disruption hits her. She's vulnerable to Siren's Call. Like all of these things affect Dio, and I think because like a lot of time you're trying to set up your cerebellum processors and like have one really big turn where all the parts are together. If there's just like it just sometimes feels like there's like one really well-timed piece of disruption and you're like, well that just like undid all the setup that I've done for the last like 2 turns.
Yeah, that's exactly how it felt. Like they play a Warmonger's Diplomacy, and then you're like, it's fine. I just arsenaled my High Octane, and then they go Command and Conquer, and you're like, no, my turn.
Yeah. And I think the other problem is like because these are all crank items, like they have a timer. So if you have a board with like, you're like, oh, I have such an amazing board. I managed to get like a boom grenade, a Teklo core that has like 1 counter left on it, and a cerebellum processor with 1 counter. And my next turn is going to be it because I like have this high octane. Then you draw up and you have like Spark of Genius blue and 2 boost cards, and you're like, yes, this turn's going to be great. And then they play Warmongers, and you go, wait, all my items are on 0 counters now, and next turn they're gone. Like I can't even just like wait till next turn. Like they're just gone. Like I just lose. Like maybe I still have the cards, but I just lose all the items on board. So yeah, it's interesting. I think she's still going to be really good. I think people need practice into her, and if they're not practiced into her, she is going to do some real damage. But I'm curious to see what happens come Worlds. Like, is Dash.io going to be running the top tables? Maybe. I could see it. She's really powerful. Maybe if people figure out those weaknesses and the fatigue matchups and stuff, I could see it. But I also kind of wonder if she's a little bit overhyped. So I don't know. If you're feeling like weirded out by the game, or like, oh, like Dash.io is going to be another Zen, I don't think she's another Zen. I think she's a fair bit more manageable.
You know what the biggest difference between Zen and this deck is? It's the equipment. She doesn't have Traverse. Traverse was a messed up card, and she doesn't
And
have that one.
Strides.
Oh, and Strides. I feel like Zen could have just like been fine if he just like banned all his equipment, and it would have been fine. Like if he just banned the chest piece, the head piece, and the leg piece, I think he'll be like much more manageable and reasonable.
Yeah. I think also just Zen being all attacks and not vulnerable to Warmongers was like just such a difference. Like Zen was vulnerable to disruption for sure, but I think like even more stuff is vulnerable for Dio. Like Zen didn't care about Erase Face. Zen didn't care about Warmongers. There's like a bunch of stuff that Zen just like didn't actually really care about, whereas Dash.io, like almost every disruption kind of works against her.
Zen didn't care about the one that loses names, right? Amnesia.
Um,
It kind of did, but it kind of didn't.
it depended. Like if he was trying to combo, he cared about it, but sometimes he just, I don't know. Sometimes he's just like levels of enlightenment, spinning wheel kick, mauling chi, and you're just like, okay, yep, that's cool.
Yeah, you hit them for 6. Great.
My mauling chi doesn't get the +1 damage from the tiger combo, and you're just like, ah.
Yeah.
But then sometimes they wanted to like double bonds you, and it's crazy. So it depended, but
Yeah, that one just had to line up,
Mhm.
but everything else was like every other disruption was like much more reasonable against it.
Yeah. So anyways, That's it for my sign off. Just wanted to share a little bit about Worlds testing. I still don't know what deck I'm gonna play. It's like I was thinking maybe Dio. I'm pretty close to off that deck at the moment though. And the deck just feels such high effort to play, and I'm not sure that it is worth it. And I feel like everybody is going to be targeting that deck, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to play through all the hate for this deck. I think I'd rather just play something else that's a little more resilient. So maybe Aurora, maybe Enigma. I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at right now, but who knows? There's like what, two and a
Yeah,
half weeks till Worlds. I'll probably change deck like 5 more times.
yeah, typical Yuki Lee bender. Oh, you know what? Damn, I forgot. This is the thing I want to talk about the in the sign off, but we'll leave it for next week. I wanted to talk a little bit about the fifth anniversary announcement that happened, and not the actual announcement because who cares about the new cards, but the trailer that was played beforehand. I want to talk about that, but I guess you know what, we'll leave it for the sign off for next week, and I'll leave it on my notes so I make sure to talk about it.
You're talking about the Night at the Armory trailer?
Yeah, the cool trailer that you were part of.
Yeah, that was really fun. You're right. We should do a sign off about that. But maybe that can be next week because it is a bit of a. I don't know. I think there's like a few things to say about it, so we'll save that story for next time. It was filmed like a while back, anyways, so it's not like it's going anywhere.
Yeah, and now we can talk about it.
Yeah, now we can talk about it. Like obviously I knew about it for a while, but I was explicitly not supposed to talk about it. So um, very cool to see the finished product. I was like curious to see how it was going to turn out, and I think that Three Floating did an awesome job. So what I'll say is, if you haven't watched that, you absolutely should. You can find it on the FabTCG YouTube. Really cool video.
Okay, perfect. And I guess we'll wrap it up here.
Good night, everyone.
All right, good night.